Are you thinking about moving to Melbourne, Florida? Well, in this video, I'm going to go over all of the costs associated with living in Melbourne, Florida as of 2022. The housing, the utilities, the food, the daycare, the transportation, insurance, and much, much more. Let's face it, inflation has driven up the cost on just about everything everywhere. But I'm going to go over some of my tips and tricks for moving to Melbourne, Florida and to help you budget wisely. So if you're thinking about moving to Melbourne, Florida, you need to see this video. Let's do it. Welcome to the Living in Melbourne, Florida channel. My name is David Jelinek. I'm a real estate agent here in the Melbourne, Florida area, which is also known as the Space Coast. If this is your first time with this channel, please know that we make videos that are all about Melbourne, Florida and the Space Coast of Florida, what it's like to live here, what it's like to work here, what it's like to play here. The food, the beaches, the entertainment, the outdoors, the real estate, and much, much more. I've lived in this area for over 35 years, so I know it very well, and I want to teach you about Melbourne, Florida. Please feel free to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, click that little bell. That way you'll be notified every time we drop a new video just like this about Melbourne, Florida. And hey, we're getting contacted every day from people all across the United States. We're getting phone calls, emails, and texts from people who are considering a move to Melbourne, Florida, and we absolutely love it. However you decide to contact us, just know that when it comes to making a move to Melbourne, Florida, we have the experience and we'll make it happen for you. Let's get on with the video. Okay, let's dive in right into topic number one with the most important and the most expensive cost of living in Melbourne, Florida, and that's where you live. So we're going to talk about what it's going to take to buy a home in Melbourne, Florida, the average price of a home purchase in Melbourne, what that is. I'm also going to pull out the map so you can see different areas of Melbourne, which you may want to consider what it's going to cost to live in those areas, and show you where the new homes might be and then where some of the older, better buys and discounted homes might be. I'm also going to point out if you want to consider renting, what the cost for renting would be, whether it be a single family home, whether it be an apartment, whether it be a condo. I'll also discuss that. There's been some nice new apartment complexes built in Melbourne, Florida over the last 10 years, and even some that are brand new this year in 2022. We'll talk about that, the expenses for that, and what might be available and what the prices are for those condos and single family homes. Okay, let's talk about what it's going to take to buy a home in Melbourne, Florida. So as of 2022, in June of 2022, the median price for a home in the Melbourne city limits is about $335. That's down a little bit from a little earlier this year, but in the city limits of Melbourne, I'm going to show you here on the map where that is, the median price for purchasing a home is at $335. Now, if we extend that out to the address, the unincorporated areas of Melbourne, then that number goes up by 100,000 or so. It takes us, the median price takes us to about 450,000. And the reason for that is if we incorporate the other areas of Melbourne that aren't in the city limits, we include areas like Viera, which is a very newer upscale area, and other areas of northern Melbourne, which are a little bit newer, a little more pricey than the city limits of Melbourne. So that takes that median price of a home up significantly, like I said, to about 450,000. So we're going to talk about both those numbers and what it's going to take, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and in many cases you have homeowners association dues to go along with those areas. Okay, let's go to the maps. And let's first start out with Brevard County, where Melbourne is located. And you can see it in the highlighted video or highlighted screen here where Brevard County is. It is southeast of Orlando, about an hour's drive east of Orlando. Inside of Brevard County, we'll find Melbourne. Okay, so again, the highlighted areas here are actually the city limits of Melbourne itself. And a couple points of notice, Melbourne Village here and West Melbourne here are actually separate cities themselves, but for the purposes of this video, they will be included in the Melbourne city area limits. And we'll talk about them in this video as well, even though they are separate entities. Unlike Melbourne Beach here, which also is its separate city, we will not include that in this video of Melbourne. Now, let's talk about the city limits. We're going to zero in a little bit and get into the neighborhoods here of Melbourne. So we're going to go down here and talk about the areas of downtown Melbourne. So this is actually the downtown Melbourne area here. Very nice area, restaurants redone very nicely, chic little shops and restaurants, and just a nice place to walk around. Some very nice restaurants. We'll go into that into a different video. But the core of the original homes of Melbourne are in this area, built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and that can be seen in this area here, in the South Gate, Palm Gardens, out there, Magnolia Park. Those areas are some of the more older homes of Melbourne, and those will be the older neighborhoods seen around Melbourne. Now, we go up a little bit to the north here, and we go to an area called O'Galley, and O'Galley itself was originally a separate city in itself. It subsequently was merged into Melbourne quite a few years ago, but also this area was originally developed, and these are the older homes in the O'Galley area, being in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so you have, mostly older, smaller homes, but still very nice neighborhoods. And this is, again, these two areas are basically the core of what is now known as Melbourne, Victoria Park, Bow Gardens, and these areas right here, Leawood Forest. Very nice areas, but this is mostly the older homes built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So let's just go out a little bit and talk about, as we get further west out here, now the lots start opening up. They start to get a little newer. The lots start to get a little bit bigger. So we get out here in the Lake Washington area, which is more of a rural area. You'll start seeing newer homes. The lots start getting bigger, up to an acre, sometimes a little bigger than an acre lots. It gets all the way out here to Lake Washington. And this is where the super rural area is, where you have some very nice neighborhoods that have lots up to 5 acres itself. Now you go up here to the northern areas of Melbourne, and up here around Wickham Park and Eastern Florida State College. Again, the neighborhoods start to get a little bit newer. The homes start to get a little bit bigger, and we start seeing homes that were built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even some newer than that, and of course more expensive. Now we'll just go down to the south here, and if we include Melbourne Village and West Melbourne again tends to be a little bit more rural. As you go west, you'll see many lots, and like in Brandywine and the other areas, you'll see where the lots are size of an acre or even more, and it's a much more rural feel out here in the West Melbourne and the June Park area in the Western Melbourne area. Now, let's talk a little about the unincorporated areas of Melbourne, okay? And that stretches out up through this section here. So Melbourne addresses actually include up to Vieira Boulevard, which is this street right here. Okay, everything south of this street here is considered Melbourne address. So Vieira itself is split in two. The northern part is Rockledge address. The southern part is a Melbourne address. So probably a 2/3 or more of Vieira is in a Melbourne address. And this is where all the extensive growth is happening, right in this area here, right where the new Costco is built off of Pineda. You have some wonderful communities that are being built here. Some of the communities are 55 and over, such as Bridgewater, and then you have other areas which are open to all different kinds of families, young, old. New neighborhoods being built are Arapica, Pangaea Park, and still many areas of Addison Village are still being finished. And building will be going on in this area for the next 20 years. There's just a lot of land to develop out here. Fantastic area. Of course, those prices are much more expensive. They generally in the 400,000s and greater out in that area there. Again, I mentioned out here, there is a couple neighborhoods out here on the beach area of Melbourne that are in the incorporated city limits of Melbourne, and we'll talk about those later. But this just gives you a rough overview of the city of Melbourne, where the developments are, the ages of the developments are, and we'll go into each one of those areas in a subsequent video to this. Okay, so now once you found yourself a home, then of course you're going to need utilities. And the first utility on my list, of course, is power. Now, when you're living in Melbourne, Florida, to get power, you're going to have to work with Florida Power and Light, and that's FPL. So the way you can make application is online. You'll need an ID. You have to have a social security number. You have to give them a driver's license number, some kind of ID. And then your service, your typical deposit now is going to be about 2 months of electrical service. So whatever is typical for that residence, you're going to pay that in your deposit. Your average monthly bill in Melbourne, Florida here for electric is about $215. Now, of course, that's going to vary greatly on many factors, such as the size of the home that you have, how much you're trying to heat or cool, how many people are in your residence residents, how much usage they use, how efficient your appliances are, like your AC unit, and also how efficient your home is, whether it has a lot of insulation or whether it has the proper windows or double pane windows or many different things there. Florida Power & Light and other agencies will provide a free energy efficiency rating of your home so that you can find out how you can better utilize the power that you're using in your home by having your home more energy efficient. So here's a tip on how you can get that deposit back. So after 23 months of service and 12 months of consecutive on-time payments, you can get that deposit back. Now, Florida ranks about in the middle of all the states when it comes to the kilowatt per hour cost. Hawaii by far is the most expensive. North Dakota is the least expensive. Next on the list of utilities is water. Water in Melbourne, Florida can be obtained through the City of Melbourne at their direct location on Strawbridge, or again, you can apply online for your water service. Again, expect to pay a deposit. This can be somewhere in the $200 to $350 range for a deposit. Your water bill for most areas of Melbourne will cover your water consumption, your sewer consumption if you're on a city sewer, and for your solid waste recycling and collection, which is your garbage collection. And your water bill will average around $100 per month, but that could range from $80 to $150 a month, depending on, of course, your water consumption. And that does include your garbage collection and your recycling, which actually is a separate charge of around $15 per month. But again, that will be on your water bill, which again will range between $80 and $150. Now, the next utility we're going to talk about is natural gas. So many communities in Melbourne, Florida have their communities and their homes hooked up to a natural gas service. And if so, you're going to be dealing with a company called the Florida City Gas Company. Your expense for this will be about $50 a month for an average family and an average home. And your deposits are little to nothing in most situations for hooking up new service with Florida City Gas. So you can have your water heater, you can have your furnace, you can have your gas range, your pool heater, even a generator can be hooked up to natural gas. It's generally a little less expensive than electricity for those that enjoy and have the capability of hooking up to natural gas. If you don't have natural gas piped to your home or community, then you have the option of doing a propane system, which are kind of a propane tank either buried in your yard or just in the side of your house there. And there are several companies in the Melbourne area that do provide propane gas to your home, and that is a different option if you happen to have a gas hot water heater or a gas furnace or a gas pool heater or even a gas range. And the last but not least for utilities is your cable service. So the most prominent cable service in Melbourne, Florida is Spectrum, and you can obtain local phone service and cable internet through Spectrum. There are others available, such as AT&T, Verizon, and others. Expect to pay around $200 if you're going to have local phone service and cable and internet service. It can, of course, be less if you choose less services, and of course, it can be more. I have 3 or 4 lines with internet and TV cable service, and my bill is in the low 200s. But again, you can make application for those generally online for almost any area that you're at. Okay, now let's get on to the next part of insurance, and that's car insurance. And again, car insurance in Melbourne, Florida, and in Florida in general, tends to be a little higher than the national average. Now, when you research statistics for car insurance, they're all over the place. So all I can tell you for sure is that I have 2 vehicles, and both of my vehicles run about $1,000 a year, maybe a little bit more than $1,000 a year. So your rates, of course, can depend on your age, the vehicle you drive, if you've been in accidents, so on and so forth. So in Melbourne, Florida, Melbourne is, again, not one of the big tourist areas. It's not a big city. So in the state of Florida, Melbourne's kind of midway through cost. You'll find it's much more expensive than some of the bigger cities, especially ones that have big tourist areas. But in general, Florida is a little bit higher than average because I'm told that there are more uninsured drivers in Florida, and plus the insured population when it comes to residents or those traveling to Florida tend to be on the more risky side. So again, expect to pay a little bit more maybe than average for your car insurance when you move here to Melbourne, Florida. And again, I pay around $1,100, $1,000 or so per year. And that again could depend on the vehicle you drive and your past driving history. Now, the next category on my list is food or groceries. Now, most areas in Melbourne, you'll find a grocery store of some kind within 5 minutes. And many times you'll find 5 grocery stores within 5 minutes of where you may live. And there are many different selections. There are many different kinds of grocery stores. The Cadillac in Florida, in my opinion, or at least in Melbourne, Florida, of grocery stores is Publix. Publix is always one of the highest rated grocery stores in the Southeast. There are several Publix stores throughout Melbourne. Publix is, they generally have large stores that have a wide variety of produce, meats, breads, everything you could ask for. Publix is one of my favorite grocery stores. I've been going to it for over 30 years here, and Publix will almost always carry something that you need. But there are other alternatives as well. For example, Costco just opened up a new large store off of Pineda in Melbourne. Costco is a membership store. Membership start at $60 per year. The Costco store in Melbourne is an amazing store. On average, I'll find Costco, most items in Costco will be a little bit less than the average store, and they have an amazing variety of food. It's also a department store. They have TVs, they have computers, they have lawn equipment, they have just about everything. Costco is also an amazing store. But there are other alternatives when it comes to grocery stores. You have things like Super Walmart, you have Sam's Club, you have Aldi's, even Dollar General has their place in low cost or discounted items when it comes to grocery and household items. Now, there are other alternatives for supermarkets, and one of my absolute favorite is the Fresh Market, located on North Wickham Road in North Melbourne. Now, the Fresh Market is a European-style supermarket that features fresh foods, fresh meats, fresh fish, cheeses, olives, fresh bread, candies, so many different varieties of things. It is a wonderful store. We love going there. I love getting the 2 tuna steaks for $10. I love always going to the Olive Bar they had there with so many different selections. So the Fresh Market was voted for the second consecutive year as the best supermarket in America by USA Today. And there is one store, like I said, in Melbourne on North Wickham Road in North Melbourne. There's also Thrifty Specialty Produce, which has several stores in Brevard. One in Melbourne is also much the same. The produce, fresh deli, it's just a great store. It has a lot of fresh options, and there are others as well. But the shopping items, the shopping options here in Melbourne, Florida are many and vast, many different types of stores to suit whatever need and wants that you have. Now, here's one I did not include in the housing, but it definitely exists for some of you, and that's HOA or condo costs. So if you're buying or living in a condo, then of course you're going to have condo association fees, and those fees can range anywhere from $80 per month up to almost $1,000 a month if you're on a oceanfront condo or in a condo that has pool and has a lot of maintenance. Oceanfront condo has more maintenance than the mainland condos. But if you're in a single family home in an HOA, if you're in a neighborhood that was built prior to the mid-1980s, then you're probably not in an HOA situation where there are costs. If you're in a neighborhood that's newer than, say, 1985, you're probably going to have HOA costs, which could range anywhere from about $50 per month up to sometimes $700 a month or $800 a month, again, depending on the amenities and the costs that you get with that HOA. So some areas have you as a homeowner, you have to maintain your house yourself, your lawn, your driveway, your roof, everything. And there may be some cost for like sign frontage for a neighborhood, or there might be a community area surrounding a lake that they have to maintain for the neighborhood expense. And then that's when your monthly expense for those neighbors are going to be $40, $50, somewhere in there. Now, if the community has a pool, then that's going to automatically up your per month fee per home, household, per neighborhood, probably $50 or so, $50 to $100 a month if there's a community pool. And if in your areas where they're going to maintain your lawn and cut your lawn, or even some homes actually will replace roofs, then your fee is going to go up dramatically. It's going to be up in the $300, $400 range, and even higher if there's other fees involved, which there are in some areas of Viera, and which some of those areas will have what we call a CDD, and we'll talk about that on a different video. But again, some areas will have HOA or condo costs, and that is something you definitely have to budget into your expense living here in Melbourne, Florida. Okay, let's talk about homeowners insurance now. Now, homeowners insurance in Florida has been a sore subject now for the last couple of decades. Due to a constant threat of hurricanes pointing at Florida and hitting Florida and other things such as high winds or hail, the homeowners insurance industry has really suffered. The insurance companies have suffered, they say, recently over the last 20 years because of a lot of claims from storms, again, from a lot of different weather issues. And that has caused many of the large companies like State Farm and Allstate to pull back over the last 10 to 15 years from their homeowners coverage in Florida. In fact, many of the big companies are just not writing any new policies in Florida. Now, I have had a policy with State Farm for almost 40 years now, so they will most of the time reissue your insurance, although some people are saying they're getting canceled with State Farm and Allstate and some of the big companies, but I still have my policy with them. But their costs and their premiums have gone up quite a bit. So there are other insurance companies that are available in Florida, but many of them, the smaller companies, have suffered from quite a few losses over the last couple of decades, and many of them have gone out of business. So in 2002, the state of Florida began a state-run insurance program called Citizens, and it was established back in 2002 really to be a last resort for those who couldn't get insurance for whatever reason. Sometimes it was too expensive, but they were the last resort for people to get insurance. But now they're almost the first resort for people getting insurance here in Florida, and their premiums actually are many times lower than the bigger companies. So they are getting a bigger and bigger market share. I believe their market share is almost up to 10% now as of 2021, which is a pretty good market share for a state-run company in any industry. It is difficult because many companies are, again, pulling out of the state of Florida for homeowner insurance due to, again, mostly storm-related damage or the potential for storm-related damage. Here in Melbourne, Florida, in the last 5 years, we've had a couple pretty good hailstorms as well. So there was a lot of claims on homes and roofs because of the hailstorms, and there was a lot of fraudulent claims, evidently, again, which caused quite a bit of losses to the insurance companies and caused some of them just to go out of business. So, but you can still get homeowner insurance here. It still can be had, and there are ways to mitigate or lower your homeowner insurance policy by getting what we call a wind mitigation report. So what is that? As a report that's usually done with home insurance or a home inspection when you buy a home. But the wind mitigation is an inspection on your roof to determine how susceptible it is to wind damage, storm damage, and water intrusion. So that extra inspection generally costs between $50 and $100, and your home inspector can generally do that along with their regular home inspection. But it is critical to getting good and lower home insurance to having your roof pass, and we will discuss that in a separate video. But again, having your wind mitigation report is essential to keeping your insurance costs low here in the state of Florida and here in Melbourne, Florida to insure. What does that mean for you as a home buyer? You can still get insurance here in Florida, but that means your cost for homeowners insurance is generally going to be a little higher than the national average. And in Brevard County and in Melbourne, Florida, the average home insurance bill for a single family home is about $2,500. Now, there are a couple other factors in getting homeowners insurance. You can reduce your policy by getting what we call a 4-point inspection and getting a wind mitigation report. A 4-point inspection covers the 4 major items of a home or a property, and that being the roof, the AC, the plumbing, and the electrical. If those are all in equitable or good shape, then modernized and in running well, you will qualify for a lower insurance or get a little discount on your insurance. Likewise, with the wind mitigation report, actually the home inspector would go out there as part of a home inspection. It's actually in addition to a home inspection. It's a slightly additional cost in many cases. They would inspect the ability for your home or the home you're buying to withstand a certain amount of winds. And if it does, they check the roof structure, they check the windows and other things of a home. And if it has the ability to withstand a certain amount of winds, then you can also get a deduction on your homeowner's policy. Now, the third thing to consider in homeowners insurance is flood insurance. Now, flood insurance is a completely different thing than homeowners insurance. It covers something different. For example, if a hurricane hits you, if you get damage from winds, something hits your window from a tree branch, or a sign goes through your window or your wall or somewhere, that's homeowners insurance. But rising waters from rain is considered flood. And if you have rising waters and that damages your home, home, that's not going to be covered by your normal homeowner insurance policy. Now, if you get rain coming in through a roof or through a window, yes, that is considered homeowner insurance. But if it rains 10 inches and water gathers in the street and comes up to your house and comes in your house that way, that's covered only under flood insurance. So flood insurance is to be obtained for homes that are in areas that have more frequent than a 100-year average flood situation or has a certain elevation below deemed to be in a flood zone. If you are not in a known floodplain and or have a certain elevation, you are deemed to be in Zone X. Zone X is the best flood zone to be in, and you won't be required to get flood insurance if you're getting financing. However, you can choose to get insurance if you're in flood zone X. I'm in a flood zone X. I purchase additional flood insurance, which runs about $300 a year, and that covers me in case there's some kind of flood where water would back into the house. That would not be covered under homeowner insurance. Okay, so if you're getting financing and you're not in flood zone X, you're in flood zone A, AE, or something else, you are going to be required to get flood insurance, and the amount you pay will depend on your elevation and or the zone that you're in. And the worse zone that you're in, then the higher flood insurance premium you're going to have to pay. Just because you're not in a flood zone doesn't mean your home won't flood. If you're in a flood zone X, your home still could flood. And that's why some of us will get flood insurance anyway. And just because you're in a flood zone A or AE or something else that is deemed to be in a flood zone, that doesn't mean you're going to flood there either, because they could have changed the topography and made swales or culverts or whatever else that won't allow it to flood as easily. So sometimes it doesn't matter what flood zone you're in, whether you're going to flood or not. It's just the technicality of the potential of what could flood and won't flood and what your potential cost may be. So you have to consider these factors when purchasing a home, what flood zone your home is in, what your additional premiums could be before you finalize your purchase and your offer. All right, for those of you that have young kids and need some kind of childcare or daycare, you do have several different options. There are some larger school academy options, and there are some smaller facilities that offer daycare and childcare. In general, if you're needing a full day for something like pre-K or less for 7-8 hours a day, that's generally going to run you about $250 per week. Could be a little bit more, could be a little bit less, but that's generally what you're going to pay for in many of the areas of Melbourne, Florida. If you have somebody that needs just a half a day, like a kindergarten, that's more like $100 to $125 per week. If you're looking for just a couple hours a day, like after school, then you can expect to pay somewhere in the $100 a week for that. All right, the next area for cost of living in Melbourne, Florida is gas and transportation. Now, gas, of course, has been high throughout much of 2022 and 2021. We're here in July of 2022, and in Melbourne, Florida, gas right now can be gotten for about $3.55 through about $3.85, which is down, of course, from about $5 where it was maybe a year and a half ago. My most favorite app for gas is called Gas Buddy. You can search on Gas Buddy for the lowest cost for gas, either by distance or by price. And this is a very useful app, and it's most of the time accurate, and I use it all the time. And here's what it looks like. Here's a view of it right here, and you can see you can search by distance or price on this app. The next category is transportation. There's limited amount of public transportation in Melbourne, Florida. The most common is called Space Coast Area Transit. These are a system of buses that have routes from Titusville through Palm Bay, which do include Melbourne, of course. Generally, you can get passes for a 10-ride pass or a 30-day pass for about $40. There are discounted rates for those in the military, students, and seniors. All of the buses have our wheelchair capability, have capabilities for wheelchair, and also have bike racks. There are also special routes that can be obtained for those with disabilities and those that are disadvantaged. Okay, so the last category I'm going to go over in our cost of living for Melbourne, Florida are the taxes. The biggie is there are no state income taxes in Florida. So Florida has some other taxes that try to make up for that, and a couple of them are, there is a tax for rentals under 6 months that a tourist is going to have to pay, and also there's a state documentary tax on real estate purchases of 70 cents per $100. So the next big tax, of course, is the sales tax, which every state pretty much has, and in Florida, that state sales tax is 6%. Now the state does allow local municipalities to add up to another 2%. Well, in Brevard County here, which is where Melbourne whatever it is, they add 1% to that. So the state, so that the sales tax for Melbourne, Florida here is 7%. So according to the Tax Foundation, Florida actually ranks fourth when it comes to tax friendliness for its residents and its visitors. Okay, so now let's go on to my last topic for taxes, and that's property taxes. So property taxes is a fairly complicated situation, but basically for property taxes, you have about 0.9% is the average as to how much you're taxed per value. And when it comes to value now, there's a couple different ways to determine value. So the county actually determines your taxable value, which is called the assessor's value. That isn't necessarily the market value. In fact, when the assessor does a valuation of your property, it doesn't try to get the 100% of what the current value is. It tries to keep it around 70 to 75%. And the main reason for that is they don't want residents contesting that value all the time. So generally, your assessed value is going to be at 70 to 75% of its value, and depending on the millage rate that you're in, you're going to then pay that tax. Now, there's a couple benefits that Brevard County and Melbourne has. They have what they call a Save Our Homes Act, which was initiated in the 90s. What that states is if it's your homesteaded residence, that your taxes or that your assessed value can only go up a maximum of 3% a year. So that in the years of the 05 and then just the recent years where property values were going up 10, 20, even 30%, the most your property tax could go up or your assessed value could go up is 3% versus the 20%. Again, that's only for your homesteaded property. The Brevard County and Florida allows for you what we call portability, is to take that. If you sell that property that was homesteaded and you have savings because of the Save Our Home Act, you can then sell that home, buy a new home in Florida, and then you can actually port that savings you've taken from the previous home to the new home. So you can actually take that savings in your tax savings to the new home. It's a kind of a complicated formula to do so, but real estate agents such as myself or a tax accountant will be happy to help you realize that savings when you do sell a Florida residence and go to another Florida residence and having that tax savings. If there's something I haven't addressed in this video about the cost of living in Melbourne, Florida, please make a comment below and I'll be happy to address that in my next video. Again, my name is David Jelinek and I'm a local realtor in the Melbourne, Florida area. And I've been helping people for 35 years. I know the area very well and will have your back in your move to Melbourne, Florida. Please call, email, or text me and we'll get back with you about your needs. And again, until the next video, all the best.